I'd like to bring to order the meeting of the Carson City Airport Authority, Wednesday, May 22nd, 6 p.m. at the Sierra Room in the Carson City Community Center. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Chairperson Law. Here. Member Barrett. Here. Member Golden. Here. Member Hamilton. Here. Member Harris. Here. Member Rogers. Here. A quorum's present.
Thank you, and would you rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Thank you. Prior to the meeting, we'll go to item C, approval of the minutes of the past meetings of the Airport Authority. I noticed there was a date error on one of the sets of minutes. Also, there were two typographical errors that I've discussed with the secretary. Does anyone else have any changes or corrections to the minutes as they were presented? Hearing none. We have no public comment. I would take a motion to approve the minutes as presented on the two previous meetings. Moved by Member Golden, seconded by Member Barrett. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None heard. Motion carries. Moving on to item D, the modification of the agenda. There has been brought to my attention that we will hear item F4 prior to item F1 out of order so that Beth can present our budget to us and then leave early before we start into the main part of our agenda for this evening. Does anybody else have any suggested modifications for the agenda? None heard. We'll move on to public comment. Is there any public comment from those here present prior to start of the meeting? None heard. We will move on to item F4 for discussion and possible action, public hearing on Carson City Airport Authority budget fiscal year 1920. Ms. Cohn.
Thank you. Thank you. For the record, Beth Cohn with Ide Bailey and Company. I handed out two items for you. One that says Carson City Airport is the final budget based on the detail provided in the second handout. Like to brief, and this was prepared by your manager. And all I did was reflect the tentative budget versus the final budget so you could see the changes from the last budget that you reviewed. So looking at the detailed budget, the two-pager, you'll see a note tentative. The column before that is now the final budget. The tentative budget is, these are just the expenses, are listed next to the final budget numbers with the change. And the changes noted are an increase in office supplies of $3,000, an increase of airport equipment maintenance of $12,000, terminal maintenance, building maintenance costs increased $2,000. You added a line for aero tracking of $11,080. You modified the cost of health care for PEBs by $840. You increased the PERS, adjusted the PERS contribution by $1,000, adjusted workers' compensation by $200, adjusted uniform/AED for $1,470. You adjusted the manager's medical expense by $157. Your Nevada payroll fees by $260, and your labor expenses based on your last discussion by $8,155. You also decreased the lease transaction, so you have a net change in your operating expenses increased $32,042, and you increase your capital outlay by $3,500. And all of those numbers are really, really summarized because they only want services and supplies, payroll, and fringe in the final budget. So those numbers I verified tied to this final budget. And I also like to point out that I also included, adjusted the estimated current year ending June 30, 2019, based on where Ken estimated the airport will end up at June 30, 2019. So those numbers have been augmented. So you'll need to have a meeting on that augmentation before June 30th of 2019.
Okay, and since we have decided that there is no June meeting, Mr. Takis, would you explain to us how we will manage that?
The idea that I discussed with the airport manager is to either hold a special telephonic meeting, and because it should be relatively short, to do that augmented budget. And I think he's working on a date.
Are there any questions of Mr. Takis or Ms. Cole?
I do have a question. Steve,
Golden.
this is really a point of reference issue here. There's a couple of matters on this evening's agenda which are reflected in the draft budget. And we haven't given the airport staff any direction on those matters, and whatever the airport authority decides could impact the draft budget. So what do you recommend there?
So like, for example, the arrow tracking, I guess, would be an obvious one. I think I would conditionally approve this and then come back to this item after you've voted on those particular items and determine whether it should or should not be in here. I think that's probably the cleanest way to do it.
Or the other option, I'm guessing, is that you could postpone a vote or a motion on this item. Just, you've taken the presentation from the accountant, and then we go through the rest of the budget, and then we can come back and vote on this. Because like you said, the medical expenses are in there, there's a couple other items.
I think that's the more
maintenance, yeah.
prudent course of action is go through those matters, because there are some moderate ticket items in there that we need to address that may or may not end up being in this budget.
So let me just point out what has to happen after you approve this budget. The page one, and there's a more official page than that you have in front of you with your logo on it, has to be signed by everyone, approved by the board. And it does include an estimated expenditure amount that's reflected based on these numbers. So if that changes, then I would just suggest that Ken, white that out and write in the number. I'll give him an updated report and he can do that tomorrow. With, you could approve it subject to that change of the estimated expenditures based on your approval or changes.
That sounds logical to me. Any other questions of Ms. Cole? Any questions regarding the budget in general? Thank you, Ms. Cole.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Okay, moving on to item F2 for discussion and moving on to item F1 for discussion and possible action. Presentation of MIS Incorporated aero tracking proposal for Carson City Airport. Mr. Moen.
Thank you, Chair Law. If you give me a couple minutes, we'll get the go-to meeting going, and then the secretary will get the party on the line for the discussion. So the group that we're introducing, I'll give this to you real quick. MIS Aero Tracking, we got a system, a transponder recording system installed from their firm in January of 2018. And that system is just outside the airport manager's office on the east side of the building, and allows us in real time to log into their network and be able to track aircraft. And so I think I came to an earlier board meeting where we discussed what the opportunity was about getting reports from that system. And of course, with anything free, you discover that there's always a caveat, and the caveat is the reporting function has a cost to it. So the real time is great, if you want to sit there and write down numbers and do all that kind of stuff. But the real benefit, of course, is to be able to use the data in some other format. And so what the format that I've been looking at and how it can be of value to us is that you are able to track aircraft by tail number, by destination, by where they arrive from. And you can utilize that information in a manner of accurate traffic counting, which is required for FA funding. Right now, we do an estimate traffic count. We don't know how real or not real that is. We attempted for a while to use game cameras at the end of the runway. We found that was very cumbersome and expensive to do. So I went to Aero Funding they are going to show the presentation that I originally had seen a couple weeks back. And then they gave me some companies that are using it, airports that are using it already. Watsonville was one, and also the other one I called was the Department of Airports for the state of Oregon. And so they're setting up this system for all 28 state-run airports in the state. And so the feedback from both of those companies was great system, very robust, very helpful. A couple other things that you can glean from it, if you're like at an international airport, you can talk about gate usage and that sort of thing. But for us, it's like runway usage. We can find out how often people are using runway 9, how often they're using 27, under what conditions, day, night. So if we have a noise complaint at somebody operating at 2 a.m., we can go back into the system and pull that data and know who the culprit is or the people that we could talk to about that. So the system is very robust in that manner. And the quote is basically involves a production of the web page. And you can separate this out in a variety of features. So each time you do a page, it adds to a cost. So my concept is that we develop one comprehensive page with the data that we're really looking to gather. And then we try that and see if we need to add additional pages. The service agreement is based upon whether you sign a 1 or 2 year agreement. The cost quoted in the budget, 1180, is including the page design and production, and then a 2 year agreement. And the reason I chose 2 year, one, obviously you save a little bit of money, but more importantly, you can develop data over time. And I think then you can tell whether or not it's really been beneficial to you. If you don't like it anymore, you can move on to a different aspect. But what I really think in the long term is not just for our airport, but our airport system throughout the state. This is something I'm looking to propose to the Nevada Airports Association, that they get this at all the other airports for the purposes of being able to go to the legislature and showing how robust the system is and being able to account for aircraft at different airports and utilize that as a basis, a fact knowledge basis going forward for future aviation trust funding. I'm not asking us so much to be a guinea pig for that, but I'm saying that's how important it could be to the whole state. So with that information, let me dial in the go-to meeting, folks. Yes, sir.
Before you do that,
Turn on your mic.
I'm sorry about that.
Member Golden.
Can we have a chance to comment before you bring them on?
Absolutely.
Okay, would that be a problem?
No, I don't think it's a problem.
Okay, would that be a problem, Chairperson Law?
Please go ahead.
Okay. And I want to do this in this form
have-
without them.
And we
on-
could always disconnect the call, so you may
whatever-
want to look at it first, whatever you feel.
Well, let me bring this
Okay.
up, and I'm not trying to put any negative light on this, but I want to state the facts.
Sure.
I've seen this before, and you are correct in what it does. I don't disagree with that. There are a lot of problems that this airport needs to consider, and one of them is the cost. I don't think the benefit is there for the cost, because what I've seen at other airports, two in particular that have used this, is that they have the system, they have the data, and the data kind of gets thrown into a file. And there's a cost associated with working with the data. It's a human resource cost, and it's significant. And so then we have to ask ourselves, is this something that we want to incur as an airport authority? Okay, that's number one. I'm not just talking about the cost, which I feel is inordinate for this, and it's just not going to get my support based on what I've seen. The other problem I have with this is, and you bring up the state of Oregon, and I know why they're doing it, okay? This is a national issue. What's happening is this data is being weaponized against airport users. And what happens is departments of taxation come after the aircraft owners. Airports come after the aircraft owners for things like landing fees. Sometimes they come after the owners for noise complaints, because what ends up happening is the noise complaints build up, and then the neighbors say, well, he wasn't following the flight path. He was way out here. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. And I have seen this company, and I have no problem with what they're doing, but I've seen this data be used at airports for all the wrong reasons. And I'm just saying, I cannot get behind it based on, what I've seen and what it's been used for. The reason the state of Oregon is on board is one reason and one reason only: taxation. And trust me, lots of California airports are on board. So is the California State Board of Equalization, because they have legislation that's going through the state legislature there to tax charter operations, not just for the sales tax, but for property tax. They want a piece of the action for property taxes. So if NetJets flies in so many times, they want to collect property taxes, and that's how they weaponize this data against users. Just saying, it's not all a bowl of cherries, and it's not all coming up roses with me, because I've seen this at other airports, and what it ends up happening is it either goes into a deep, dark gray file, or people start to use it for the wrong reasons.
Member Harris.
If I could just comment on the comment. First of all, I completely agree with the first case, that if we get the data and we don't use it, then that'd be a pretty bad thing. I'd certainly see that it could be useful. I mean, I'm the kind of guy that thinks that better data is really important, because not good data leads you to make the wrong decisions, or in a lot of cases, not make decisions at all because you don't have good data, okay? The other part, though, the weaponized part, I have to disagree with. I see nothing wrong with data being used to properly collect taxes in any entity. I mean, this is a public facility we're talking about. People are publicly flying in and out. They're using a public facility. They should have absolutely no concern with information being recorded about their coming and goings. I mean, I got to tell you, if you can drive down the street and have your license plate recorded and put into a big database in Denver and sold to anybody that wants it, then I don't have any problem with the idea that somebody's tail number will be recorded on their airplane. So I got to say, I don't understand the concern about weaponization. I do understand the concern about spending money and not getting the benefit.
Other comments? Mr. Rogers.
I'm return on investment concerns, or were my concerns. That's a lot of money. Well, first of all, the cost seems really exorbitant, and I don't know why we would need a website to deliver data. We could have reports come to the airport manager without having to build a website, in my opinion. But I sort of, the other two comments have danced around. What exactly do we think is the return on investment? Are we going? I mean, if we're going to gather data about comings and goings, and we're going to turn that into increased revenue for the airport, I'm not sure how that links. Are we going to go and make contact with certain people when they come in and out, and and talk to them about increasing their exposure, so to speak, to the Carson City Airport and delivering additional revenue and what that would look like. I mean, I'm not sure how you get from knowing who comes and goes to an increase in revenue to the Carson City Airport. So that's what I'll be curious to listen to when we hear the presentation.
Member Hamilton.
I was asking the airport manager of some way of possibly being able to track some of the aircraft. Examples. I was taken off runway 27, someone was taken off runway 9, and, almost in midair, we avoided each other. And of course, I reported it, and they said, "Did you get an N number?" I said, "Well, no, I was kind of looking at the prop and looking where I was going, and no, I did not get an N number." Okay, and of course, the guy reports, "Well, I mentioned that I was taken off 9, and of course, no one heard him." Another couple of instances of mid-airs. I've also asked that if we could possibly do some recording of people talking on the radio so as we could put things together so that at least if there's any incidents, we can perhaps mitigate any safety issues. So that was my motivation for talking to Ken, to pursue some type of a system. Now, this particular system, I don't know one versus another. I mean, I could develop a system where I could put a little ADS $200 ADSB receiver, put a video camera on a little iPad, and look at that and record at the same time and have everything that way, and not knowing what specific this would add in the cost. I can't speak to that, but I just want to make it clear that I think it's good as far as a safety issue, and tracking is very important to me. Flying there every day, knowing who's where and what, because I miss a lot of things. It'd be nice to be able to find someone to improve our safety overall. So those are my comments.
In my personal opinion, safety is an issue that, we have to be cognizant at all times. I think everything that's been mentioned here is something that we all have to keep in mind before we make this expenditure. And at this point, what I would prefer doing would be to watch the presentation, then go offline, have some more discussion, and then go forward with it. So if that's okay with the rest of you, that is how I intend to proceed. Mr. Takis, is that fair enough for you?
Yeah, that sounds good. I think that I just want to mention, I would like to have them address the privacy issue, because that's one of the things that I'm hearing here is there's two sides, two edges to that sword. One is knowing if something bad's going on. The other thing is the big brother aspect of it, of having somebody track everywhere you go. Certainly, if somebody proposed a system like this for your cars, and Nevada actually rejected the idea of mounting cameras to capture license plate information. The governor rejected that about 3 governors ago. But I think most of us would react negatively if we thought that somebody was tracking every place we went in our car. And so I think we need to think about that too in terms of how to go forward. But I see both pros and cons to this, so.
Okay, at that point, Mr. Moen, if you'd like to go ahead and get them online so they can make their presentation, that would be great.
Please enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign. You entered no digits. Please re-enter your access. The access code you entered is invalid. You entered 742538534 Please re-enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign. To enable audio controls, please enter your audio PIN followed by the pound or hash sign. If you do not have a PIN, just press pound or hash.
Matt, can you hear us?
I can, Ken. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Just give us one moment. I gotta get the video screen turned on, otherwise we're ready to go.
Sure.
Yeah, that's on. Does that need to?
He's got it up on the screen.
All right, Matt, we have you through the speaker and we have the presentation on the overhead.
Can we maximize the size of that?
I'm trying to figure that out myself. I think that's, we can get rid of this. Oops, we're disconnected. Matt, can you still hear us or no?
I can hear you.
What happens when you hit this guy?
That's the minimized one
Oh,
there.
that's minimized.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we're just trying to maximize the presentation on the screen, and I'm a little bit IT handicap on some of this stuff, so, but.
Okay.
Oh, no. PC just crapped out. Can I say that on a recorded line? Sorry, technical difficulties. I'm gonna put you on hold for just a sec.
Sure. Katrina, what did you call it? Drone what? The website?
I'm sorry, Matt. Say,
Oh, I'm sorry, Ken. How you guys doing with the display?
we're good. We had, the computer froze up, and so we had to shut it down and, or log him back in.
Got it.
So, we should be there now. We had
Store
the,
pages, hang on. That way we don't have to log back in. Yes.
I think we're back.
Do you want to maximize
Should
it?
be seeing Lake Tahoe, bunch of weather on the screen.
Yes. Well, let me get the board's attention and we'll be ready to roll.
Okay.
All right, Matt, I'm going to introduce you to Chairman Law. She's the chair of the Carson City Airport Authority. And then we have 4 members of the board present. And so we're going to let you take it away when you're ready.
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'd like to thank the authority for letting us present tonight. We really appreciate that. Ken, also to you too. Thanks for the invitation. We're going to have 2 presenters tonight, Mo Calero and Katrina Jensen. Mo's the owner of the company. He's going to go over the ADS equipment, the display, and then the data that's collected and archived.
While
And
you're
then
doing that,
Katrina will
excuse me, while you're doing that, could you announce those names again and spell them for the record, please?
Sure. Moses Calero, M-O-S-E-S. Last name's Calero, C-A-L-O-U-R-O. And then Katrina Jensen, K-A-T-R-I-N-A, J-E-N-S-O-N. Again, Mo is the owner of the company. He's going to go over the ADS equipment, ADS-B equipment, excuse me, and then the display and then the data that's collected. And then Katrina's going to show you how the data is used in the different types of reports. Before we start, does anybody have any questions?
I think you're ready to go.
Okay. Mo?
Great, thank you all again for allowing us to talk tonight in regards to our system. You're looking at the live ADS-B tracking screen. You can see aircraft with their details listed below and also to the right. When you click on the aircraft, you get its particulars, and then below you have a list of all the aircraft that you're seeing on the screen. This Carson City has had equipment there since July 2011 and has been collecting data since then. As you can see, in exchange for hosting that equipment, you have access to this display. Some of the functionality here is you have different overlays like Google overlays, grayscale, satellite, the VFR sectionals, IFR, and then we have weather running now. We also have airspace, airfields, navigation. You're seeing all the tracks from all the aircraft that are in range of any one of the receivers that we have around the country. We have 375 at airfields, and then we have 625 in total spread around the country and overseas.
Mo, this is Ken. It appears that our display is frozen. Is that correct? Because we're not getting any, oh, there we go.
Okay, sorry about that. So you should see the aircraft now with the weather. And did you see the terminal, the VFR sectionals and whatnot?
Yes, but when you selected, now I see the IFR high chart?
Yes. Okay, great. And then you can see that the aircraft, the tracks are highlighting their altitude. So purple is high altitude, white is on the surface. So you get a general sense of what's happening in the airspace. I'll go back to Street View. It's a little more gray. Actually, Street View is the best probably at this point. The system has a basic measuring tool. Any questions so far?
Mo, could you zoom in on the Carson City area?
Sure. Stay with me a second.
This is Paul Hamilton. I do have a question. You said that you have all these sensors located. Are those your company sensors, or are those FAA sensors, or what kind of sensors are those?
So it's very small equipment. It's our equipment separate from the FAA. I'm just going to reduce some information here to make the screen run a little quicker. So if you bear with me, I can actually show a picture of the equipment.
So this is equipment similar to, say, cell phone towers.
It's more along the lines of like a router. It has an internet box that connects to power and internet access, and that 3 antennas sit on the roof, and those antennas pick up both ADS-B frequencies, 1090 and 978, and then the third antenna picks up the VHF, like CTAP Unicom signal. Bear with me just a moment. I'll pull up that. Oops. Sorry about that. I'll be right with you. Bear with me a second, please. Can you see the screen now?
Yeah, we got an Acrobat error, so I can share with the board what the equipment looks like. I think what they're really interested in is the functionality and the reporting. So if we can see the Carson airspace, and then you can walk through the reporting process and how that might be useful for the airport, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. We got your screen with the equipment now.
Okay. So you have the VHF. I mean the fiberglass antennas, and 2 of those connect and receive the ADS-B signal, and then the third one is a VHF antenna, and that just picks up again CTAP Unicom. And the box is quite small. It's about the size of an internet router. So those are placed at 600 plus locations around the country and overseas. Okay. Let me just pull off the way. good to go now. How close would you like to get? Do you want to just descend on the field there, or?
Yeah, anything that's probably within a 10-mile radius of the airport and probably below 15,000 is probably helpful. I mean, the stuff above's okay.
That's
but-
good enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it doesn't look like we have any activity at the airport right now.
No, the last operation you had was about a half an hour ago when the weather came through.
Okay. So with that in mind, could you go ahead and walk through the reporting process and the data that you share with me?
Certainly, just a moment. I'm going to switch the screen over to Katrina.
Okay.
Okay. So you guys, let me know when the screen is switched over. You should see
We
the
are.
charts and the tables.
Yes, ma'am.
Fantastic. All right. So this is the backside of what Moses was basically just showing you. When he installs the sensor that he has at any airport, we begin collecting that data through the ADSB. What we do with that data is we work with each airport to develop customized reporting systems based upon their requirements. So what you're looking at here is a report that we actually put together this is for El Paso. So they have a little bit of commercial, cargo, and general aviation at their airport. So that's why you're seeing kind of the mix that we have with the different tables. But what we do is we are using Power BI, which allows us to integrate data across multiple platforms. And so I'll show you a report here shortly that we're actually working with several airports to calculate landing fees. So they provide us in a format that we link to, let's say in Excel, and we integrate that with the data that Moses is capturing as well to create the landing fee summaries. What's really powerful, though, about these tools, besides being able to integrate across multiple software platforms, is the ability to quickly drill down into your data. So as a default, what you're seeing here is we started collecting data basically back at the end of 2018, and we collect that hourly, basically, or even faster. I'm not sure what the rate is. But what it allows us to do is we can now filter the data so that we can say, I want to take a look at, let's say, maybe the last 2 weeks of the month of April. And you can see, as I was filtering that data, all of these charts, all of these tables update to reflect that time period that I've selected. Now, all of these reports, like I said, are customizable. So that's everything from the colors, the layouts, any graphics, what filters you guys require to be able to look at your data. But what is also really great about these tools is, so I showed you I filtered on date here, but what's different than Excel and Access and other reporting tools and PowerPoint even is I can now filter with a filter like I have on the left, or actually I can use the charts and tables to filter as well. So if I want the last 2 weeks of American Airlines data, I can click on the table of American Airlines and all my charts, all my reports that are on this page will reflect American Airlines. And I can remove it just by clicking again. Now what I showed you is when you do click on a chart or a table to filter additionally, what it does is it's going to, like you can see again, this is a really great example, is it will gray out the amount of volume that is not associated with American, and it will leave the solid color. If I really just want to see American Airlines itself, I can come over and use this filter, and now instead of a comparison, it's actually giving me the counts for each of those. Okay?
Okay, this is
Please feel free to interrupt.
This is Chairman Law, and is it possible, do you have a bank of data that is more representative of a local GA airport rather than a commercial facility?
Do you have Watsonville's
Absolutely.
material, Katrina?
I do.
Okay, either one, Jackson County or Watsonville. I think Watsonville's more reflective of the Carson Airport.
No problem. Let me just load that up here. So this is same type of information. So this is, again, what we consider our operational summary, but this is for Watsonville Airport. This is their internal report that they're using. They also have a public site that I can show you, but basically what it is it's just a little bit less of detail and a little, I'll just pull it open actually, and just more of an overview. What we also do when we're doing public sites is we will change the filter. So instead of, like you can see here, I have the, so I can get down to an individual day. For Watsonville's public, we allow them to look by monthly buckets only. And that's pretty common what we do on the public type website. But I'll show you, so this again is their internal site. We capture the total number of operations for the set period that's filtered, and as a default, it will take everything that's in the table until you filter the date. Capture the number of nighttime operations, break it out by arrivals and departures, and then Watsonville actually wanted to know, the type of aircraft and the number of manufacturers and the number of models were coming in. The reason they wanted that more specific information is they're actually getting ready to do a runway extension, and so that's how come you see this type of information. But we have all of this data. Said we don't do a template. We build this to custom for each airport based upon your requirements. So what you can see is like we do have, here's kind of the monthly average by arrivals and departures and on field, what a standard week looks like at Watsonville for, by day. We break it out by jet, turboprop, reciprocating, and rotary, and then show the top 3 models for each of those. And again, all of these charts and tables can be updated and filtered by just clicking on it. So you can see even by hour, we can update this. Another piece that we've done for Watsonville that is very, very good because they also have some noise issues is you can see what we do is we keep 1 week's worth of track data. And so over on the right on the map, you can see all of the aircraft that have basically crossed a geofence or a perimeter that we have set up around the airport. And so we don't see the true, the full origin destination. We just see when the aircraft crosses into their perimeter. But what this allows us to do is we can now go in and pick by tail number or however we design to filter it, what that tail number, that aircraft did. We can see that it actually has 2 tracks, so basically a start and an arrival and a departure. I can filter on that track, and now I can see where the dot is. This aircraft came into the geofence here, came around, and then came into the airport. And I can see that because if I look at the average altitude on this chart below, you can see that, obviously it's decreasing, it's coming in. The map actually allows me to zoom in so I can see what neighborhoods it's crossing over. So this is really good if you have noise issues within your city. You can see, what was the approach or the departure that was taken. One of the things that we are working with Watsonville, or Watsonville's working with their GA group, is to change when the aircraft turn on and off the transponder. The longer an aircraft leaves the transponder on, the longer we can track it. So we have actually seen tracks here at Watsonville. You see where my mouse is kind of circling? This is one of their fuel locations. And so we can actually track if an aircraft comes in, taxis over to the fuel location or taxis over to a hangar, we can track actually where it parks or departs from on the airport property. Okay. So we've done this as well, and this gets back to kind of the integration. If you have noise monitor data, we can integrate this based on time of day and hour. with the operations, with the noise monitoring as well. Okay. This is one of the landing fee summary that we're actually doing for Medford, Oregon. So what they've asked for is they have a detailed report, which I will show you in a second, but this is basically a summary of that detailed report. So now they can see that most of the aircraft coming in that pay landing fees actually are registered within the state of Utah, Washington, and then Georgia. We see, the top weight, aircraft weight category and who's getting that. I can filter in by the heat map. So now if I pick regional aircraft that are coming into Medford, you can see it'll update and this will give you, who it is. So SkyWest, Compass, and then a little bit of general aviation, the type of manufacturers, the landing fees, and then when those landing fees occurred by month. And like I said, additionally, we also provide for them a complete table. So this actually gives them the owner, the registered address of each tail number. Every single time that they come in, we count the number of ops that they have, and we actually calculate the landing fees as well. Now, all of these reports, too, you can export out to PDF and or PowerPoint. It's really pretty simple. I can show you here. It's literally you do File, Export to PowerPoint, Export to PDF. So if you come in and you filter your data, let's say I want to see just the evening information for Watsonville, you can now take this report filtered this way for evening data and export this out into a report. Okay. Some of the other things that we do, so I'll show you, this was also for Medford. We're actually taking some of their existing reports and transforming this. So this is basically their passenger flow by year and month. And while this is great, and we've all built this type of table in Excel, it really doesn't give you much information as to what's really happening. So that's where we've taken that report that I just showed you in PDF, and we've converted it to a dashboard. So now you've got, the large table still shows you the exact same information. You have the totals. We've added the bar chart. So now when you start scrolling, you can definitely see that there's a trend, year over year, that it's still an upward trend. You can have the comparison of year over year passing what we think the projected passenger flows are. And just like with all the other reports, I can filter this data. So if I want to see the last 13 years, everything will refresh accordingly, and it will give me kind of the average passenger flow and then the projected forecasted upper and lower bound volumes. So it's a way to really kind of drive analysis and drive information out of your data that you wouldn't normally see when you just chart in Excel. Last one, I know this is El Paso, but it's a great example to kind of show you guys the integration of any graphics that you may have. So this is actually looking at the traffic that comes into each of the gates within a terminal. So we can actually, and this gets back to leaving that transponder on. If they leave it on and they go to a hangar, or if they come to one of your gates or a fuel depot, we can record that information and record how often aircraft are entering a zone. And so that's what we've done here for El Paso, is around each gate there's a perimeter, so that when an aircraft comes in and parks at a gate, we can actually capture that information. We can tell you by airline, by type of aircraft that come in. So if I filter on A1, I can see that it's all jet and regional aircraft. I know it's Mesa, Compass, and we would be able to do this as well for general aviation. Okay. The last one I'll show you is, this is a weather summary that we do. So again, this gets back to that integration of data from multiple sources. So all of this weather data is actually NOAA weather data that Moses collects as well. What we're doing is we're actually doing a second phase to this piece. So right now, this is straight weather, kind of wind, temperature, dew point. But what we can do now is we can actually bring in additional data that Moses has captured And we are linking this up by, by date and by hour. And so now I can tell you at 6 p.m. when the wind gusts were 9.46 knots, we're actually arriving or departing your airport at that time of day. And again, we've got all of the filtering capabilities that you could want, as I demonstrated in the other reports. Okay? Any other questions? Anything else that you guys would like to see?
Member Golden?
Good evening, Michael Golden. I have
Sure.
a few questions for you.
Absolutely.
Two that are definitely for you, since you're handling the data.
Okay.
This airport is not obligated to have aircraft operating with ADS-B. We're just not in terminal airspace. We're nowhere near terminal airspace. We have some Mode C airspace about 10 miles north of us in Reno, Class Charlie airspace, I'm sorry. And that's about it. People can fly in from many points in the western U.S. and not need ADS-B. And they can continue to operate here and fly all over the region without ADS-B. And knowing our customers at this airport and knowing our tenants, many of them are not going to equip with ADS-B because they don't need to. They can fly to, all sorts of places and never need ADS-B. So if they're equipped with Mode C, how are you going to pick them up? Same question for those who block their tail number, like myself. How are you going to pick me up when I block my tail number?
Okay. Actually, I think Moses can answer that better.
Yep. I'm just going to jump in. So block tail numbers. The ability to block tail numbers rests with the FAA, meaning that you can file a bar request, I guess, with the FAA. That's separate, and that's on their network. So what that means is that they have a data feed, they output position information, flight plans, they block the folks that are on the list. We're operating separately from them, and your transponder, when it is active, it is emitting to the public your position. So we constantly will pick that up. In terms of Mode C, as long as there's an emitter, meaning there's another aircraft or there's primary or secondary radar interrogating, then the Mode C transponder will emit the signal on 1090 megahertz, and we'll pick that up. We won't particularly be able to plot the position as accurately, but we use something called multilateration, which is if we have three receivers in the area seeing the same aircraft at the same time, then we can get a rough estimate of the position. But at the very least, as the plane descends towards the surface, eventually only one of the receivers will pick up that signal, and that will also give a rough indication of the position of the aircraft.
Okay, but you kind of went to my point there, Moses, which is those that are operating with Mode C transponders, which the tenants at our airport mostly will remain Mode C. Again, we're just not in an area where ADS-B is going to have a detrimental or tremendous impact. What you're telling me is you're not going to be able to pick up who the aircraft operator is, what the tail number is, et cetera, what type of aircraft, because they're not enabled with ADS-B. Is that correct?
Correct, and I think maybe the best way to say it is, so we're not pitching that we can get you 100% coverage at all. I mean, so what we're saying is when the aircraft is equipped, and we've had about, I'd say, 5,500 operations tracked since the equipment went up. That data is valuable. So for use with AIP funding and for, last known position, situational awareness, if you have flight schools doing touch and goes on the field, that data is available to the dispatchers of the flight schools potentially down the road. Those are the kind of reasons, A, to have it on the field, which you obviously do, but then in terms of the reporting, the collecting of that data, can be used for your master plan. For airports that need to change their approaches, that data is useful.
Okay,
The other thing to keep in mind too is if you're capturing data as well at your airport, if you're capturing any runway usage or things of that nature, we can also integrate that into our data. That's where this tool has become so powerful, is you no longer have to rely on a single source of information to try to put together a complete picture of the operations at your airport. You can pull from multiple sources. Now, the limitation, of course, is that there has to be data.
right. In other words, and again, this is Michael speaking, and there's two pilots on the airport authority, myself and Paul. So we're more I'm sorry, there are three, Linda. I'm sorry, Linda. There's three out of six of us here are aircraft owners and pilots, and our legal counsel is also aircraft owner and pilot. But the point being is that I'm trying to get out of you is this is only data that you can procure from ADS-B equipped aircraft. Is that correct?
Yes, well, let me just add to that. So our network.
That's fine. That's all I wanted you to do. Is just say yes or no. We don't need any more. Now, can you help me with one more thing, Mo? And I said I had a couple questions for you. This is my second question. Help me understand, in addition to, procuring this data for purposes of grant funding, help me understand at this airport how we're going to get a significant return on investment for this product that you are providing.
Well, so the way we look at it is after hours operations. So if you don't have a tower, then you're not able to count your operations. You don't have access to what's happening on the field. So obviously it's if you're not in terminal airspace, you're going to get less of a capture rate, but you're missing what's happening on the field. So if you have somebody that's not closing out their flight plan and the tower calls down and says, hey, this aircraft is it on the field and it's midnight, you're missing that. You're missing folks that could be on the field fueling. You must have cameras or some kind of way to track that information, but that's not available. I guess we believe this is useful to airports around the country. We've had our customers are happy with the data. They're using it for analysis. They're using it for their AFP funding. They're using it to collect landing fees. So that's where we see the value in the system.
Thank you very much.
Do we have other questions of the presenters?
I have a question.
Mr. Moen?
And Moses, this is Ken. If an aircraft's flying on a 1200 code but files a flight plan, does that data get captured?
If it's ADS-B, it does.
If it's not ADS-B, it does not. So we're not gathering that data from VFR flight plans. Is that right?
We are not gathering that data. We are getting data directly from the FAA through the SWIM program. So if there's somebody that filed a flight plan to the airfield that has a non-blocked tail number, we will pick that up as well.
Okay.
In the reports.
If they file let me confirm that. If they file a VFR flight plan through the system, do they get that data or not?
I don't believe so.
Okay. But we can pick up 1200 codes. So if we see 1200 codes and altitudes changing, that doesn't get picked up?
If they're ADS-B, regardless of if you file the flight plan, we will see them in the system.
Okay, so ADS-B only. Okay.
And this is Chairman
And
Lon.
we'll see, but we don't plot those as accurately.
This is Chairman Law, and I have a question. I understand from the original speaker that you have been on the field since July of 2011. Have you been collecting data all that time?
2018.
Okay, then it was, I thought that had been misspoken, so that's, okay, so January of 2018, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Takis?
Yeah, this is Steve Takis, I'm the airport counsel. So in the demonstration that Katrina was showing, where you showed the entire track of an aircraft, does that mean that the data you're collecting from Carson City right now is being used for the benefit of other airports? So for example, in the example that she gave us, I don't remember what the two airports, yeah, they were between, but like Watsonville, if somebody took off from Carson City to Watsonville, you're currently using the Carson City data in conjunction with the Watsonville data to provide that service to Watsonville. Is that right?
Yes, the data is
Not in the-
for other airports, but so to put it, let me put it to you another way. So what we provide airports around the country is they get access to the live display at no cost. If they want the reports, which includes a rewind capability, that is a cost that they incur. Typically, or in all cases, the airports are only interested in their own operations, and their reports, due to the amount of volume of data, are limited to their airfields. So one airport typically is not, or in all cases is not, pulling data from another airfield.
Right, you would be charging us to have reports on our data, but if we just wanted to watch it live, we could watch it for free? Is that, am I paraphrasing that correctly, or is that wrong?
Yes, that's the current arrangement. So at all the airfields that have our equipment, there's no cost access to the live display. They can use that within the tower. They can use that within the pilot's lounge, at home to trek on the field. That is at no cost, and that's what's been installed since 2018, July 2018.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Moen, you want to wrap this up?
Moses, Matt, Katrina, thank you for the time. Really do appreciate it. I know that Moses and Matt are probably up past 10 o'clock now on the East Coast. And I will be speaking with you guys in the future. I want to thank you for the time and the presentation.
Thank you.
Well, appreciate it.
All right, good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, to resume our discussion from before, do I have comments from the members?
I have a question.
Member Golden.
Ken, how much rent are they paying us?
As I mentioned at the beginning, the equipment is provided to us for free in exchange for the live feed.
Thanks.
I guess my question is, in the demonstrations that they did, I see a lot of information for certain types of airports. I'm not altogether sure the value that I would attach to it at our airport, since most of our equipment is not equipped with the type of the ADSB equipment. And therefore, I'm wondering about the usability of the information we get back from them. And so any comment you can make on that, Ken, would be helpful to me.
Well, I share a different opinion about the value of the information. For one, this is the state capital, and what our vision in the strategic plan and our discussions through the master plan is that this is to go after corporate aviation. Those guys are all going to have ADSB. The other GA aircraft that are going to skirt the airspace system are going to be less functional, and that's one of the problems. It's going to actually time some of these operators out. Can you skirt through Nevada and a lot of airspace that's not A, D, B, or any of that nature? Yeah, absolutely. But you're going to be very limited about where you can go and what you can do. So those over time are going to change. ADSB is only going to grow in the system. It's not going to shrink. So any new equipment that comes online is all going to be ADS-B equipped. Corporate aviation, on the other hand, the way we develop, and our big focus, and this is my focus, and this goes to John's point about ROI. As we grow corporate aviation, and part of our fee structure, which we're going to be talking about in this next year, should be calculating different areas to collect revenue. Because right now, we're asking the burden of the airport to be maintained strictly through our ground leases. And as we discover, that's a very marginal return on some of these leases, especially the older ones. Now, as these properties and these leases expire and we get new leases, we're going to end up with either older buildings or we're going to raise them and we'll have new buildings. But we still got to attract tenants to do that. If we have a good record of where these operators are going to, coming from, and how they're using our airfield, we'll have data on that and can direct market people, which we can't do now. I mean, Michael may collect some data through the FBO about who uses his facility, but that's not something that we as the airport authority readily have access to. If Michael was not on the board, it might not even be available to us all because it'd be proprietary information. However, when we look at the master plan and AIP funding, especially when we start talking about the nighttime instant approach, who's using that airport when we're not there? How do we track that? How do we see the effectiveness of these approaches and go to the FAA and say, hey, look, this is a critical piece to our pie about developing our airport and to get this nighttime restriction relief. This gives us something to do with that. When we go through the master plan, we say, hey, look, we need to add 800 feet to our runway. First thing to say, based on what? We're going to have data to say, we're getting these kind of aircraft, they're coming from these destinations, and this is why it's going to be critical for our funding. Now, can the data be used in different methods? Whether it's Michael's point about noise abatement. If I get a call at 2 o'clock in the morning and somebody says, hey, I got somebody out that's buzzing right over my neighborhood, they're doing touch and goes, and I can't provide any value to that. And we as an airport have a responsibility back through the FAA for noise to the airport. So as part of being able to focus that attention on one operator versus a whole slew of operators is really critical. I got a call 10:30 last Saturday night about helicopter operations at our airport. And I said, ma'am, I'm not there. I have no idea. Could be Care Flight, could be the sheriff department, except for they haven't been flying recently. It could be the Navy. So I made calls. Hey, were you guys out here in this area? I can't identify them. It's easy now in hindsight to say it wasn't me, but if I have the data, I go back, no, you got 3 UH-60s out here at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't think that's appropriate use of our airfield at that time. So in that manner, it can be helpful. But really in the use of the airport, it's helpful. How many operations do we have coming off 9? How many do we have coming off 27? What time of day are they? How many NetJets operators? Should the airport be collecting landing fees on operators like that? Perhaps we should. And I don't think if an operator's primarily based out of our airport, but it's not being reported, like it's in a hangar and we don't have an N number on it, yeah, we should be entitled to tax revenue. They're using our airfield. And so that's how we build up our finances to support future development. If we end up having to pay for part of that instrument landing system, that approach lighting system, we got to have resources to do that. If we're going to replace some of our aging equipment, we got to have a resource to do that. We're going to put in a snow equipment removal building, but still focus our AIP money on runway and taxiway infrastructure. We have to have the resources to do that. And part of that is getting the people that aren't currently contributing to that pie to contribute to that pie. That's part of the plan. I think that there is a lot of value in that data. And whether it's publicly shared or not, that's a whole entirely different matter. When they talk about building a web page, they have you can have a public page, but I don't think that's necessarily the purpose of it. The purpose is to have a private page for us and being able to maintain and use that data. And I think it's very robust to do those kind of things. Nefarious about tracking people and where they're going, what they're doing, it's strictly more of an interest, like how many flights a day do we have between Las Vegas and Carson City? Can we market that? Does that become an approach to market commercial air service? Well, that'd be part of any study on a commercial air service study, was how many people you got a day going there? How many flights? What times? What are the relevance of that? Is it only during the biennium? Is it during the off-part times of the year? I think that data can be very robust for the airport. And I think it's worthy of a serious consideration by the board to make that investment. And I am currently researching another firm that provides data, and I think it's less ADS-B data and more flight plan data. So if that's the case, this is something I'll find out. I have a conference call tomorrow morning about it, that I'll find out whether or not that data can be pulled just from the flight plan information that's filed, whether it's IFR or VFR flight planning. And so I've got some questions about that. But also in negotiations with other operators on the field that we've talked about that currently aren't paying into the system for their airport use, how robust are they in their airport usage? And that information is valuable to the airport authority. So in a nutshell, I think there's a lot of value to it. And I think that's when we start prioritizing our strategic plan, our master plan, the option to have this system in the budget is good. Whether or not that's something we pull the string on in 30 days, that's not my consideration. My consideration is in the fiscal year as we proceed down these other paths to have the option to do that. If the board elects not to do it, the money doesn't get spent. But I say leave it into the budget for future consideration, and then we as an organization can determine how we proceed with that. But I think it was important to see that and get an understanding for it. And then there's obviously some ways it could be misused, but I really see the ways it can be used in a positive effect.
Any questions of Mr. Moen? Mr. Golden?
Just one, Ken. I heard this many a times, and I will say too, comment, you moved the needle with me a little on this. Okay, that's a good thing. Question for you from your prior background. Does Reno have landing fees?
Yes, they do.
Okay, is it for aircraft over 6,000 pounds,
No.
or do you know the threshold?
Anybody who's Part 135 operator.
So
pays a landing
135
fee.
only?
Yeah.
Okay.
And 121.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Okay,
And that's commercial and air taxi.
okay.
Sorry, I apologize for that.
And I will state for this airport authority and for the record, there's only one other airport around here that has landing fees, and they are very low, and that's Tahoe. And they have a threshold of dollars per 1,000 pounds.
Right.
And it starts at 6,000 pounds. And if you want to alienate the general aviation community, you establish landing fees. It is a rarity that you experience landing fees. Any airport I've flown into, landing fees are non-existent. There's no such thing. I've heard more complaints in the 12 years we've been operating at Tahoe over those landing fees, and over 30, 40 bucks. It just alienates people. We literally have traffic that will go from Tahoe down to Carson City because there's no landing fee here. Because it's such an oddity to charge, not necessarily the airlines, but to charge GA aircraft a landing fee. It is not the norm.
Just in response to that, if you have, let's say, NetJets flies in that airport on a reoccurring basis, they're making landings on your fuel. A lot of them will tanker fuel. They won't buy fuel because of the price of the fuel. So in any operator, you and I know both that everybody will complain about their cost of service. They'll complain about the cost of gas. And we all know that there's a cost of doing business. And NetJets knows there's a cost of doing business. If they're going to South Lake, they're not going to land their passenger in Carson City, put them in a car, and drive them up the hill.
You'd be shocked.
I would be. But I know that we had this same discussion during Burning Man at Reno.
Yeah.
And there are numerous Part 135 operators who go from Reno to Black Rock City. And they hooted and hollered about what the charge of the landing fee was, but in the end, they paid it. And it was, some of these airplanes were paying like 10, 11 bucks to go and do that operation. But they made money by shuttling those folks from Reno to Black Rock City. And that's where the business case is made.
Understood.
And so, and I'm not here to debate the merits of landing fees at this time. What I will debate is that when you own an airport, you have to have sufficient revenue to operate that. And that may be a case, not saying it is the case, that we have to look at, just as we have to look at all our fees. And if we, for example, rented property without an appraisal, we would be doing a disservice. Granted, the NRS now tells us we have to do that, but there were people that were doing it before because they were not looking out for the best interest of the airport.
No,
So
understood.
that's all
I'm just saying,
yeah.
you would be surprised at how many of these operators literally will fly to Minden or fly to Carson. NetJets, no. FlexJet,
Maybe.
you betcha.
Yeah, maybe.
They hear what the fee is and they say, oh, we can save $50 or $100.
And we don't have to pay a ramp fee, and I've heard it. Yeah, I
And they
understand.
do, I'm just saying,
Right.
it's more, because I heard the presentation and they said, well, primary function of this is tracking aircraft for landing fees. That was a big deal.
To an airport operator, to collect revenue that's quote unquote leaking from your system is a benefit to the airport. Absolutely. The system is not designed for the user. It's designed for the airport to collect data. What you do with that data and how you utilize it's a whole different function. And that's the merit for the board to decide how they want to proceed with it. What I'm doing as the airport manager is saying, hey, I found a system or a method of being able to reinforce all that we've been talking about, master plan, strategic plan, airport operations, and whether or not this is something that we as an organization want to do. So I'm not saying today, yeah, vote on this to approve it. Of course, I prepared a board memo that outlines the approach, but I've never suggested that the board make anything other than leave it in the budget for consideration as we move through this process. And whether or not the monies get spent is a totally different matter. And that, I don't.
Member Rogers.
Is there a way for us to test the system to see what percentage of traffic that it actually captures?
We can do it through the real-time monitoring. And so there might be a way to set a video camera up and monitor it for a day, a week or two or something and see if you can pull data off of that. So there might be a way for us to work around that.
The thing that bothers me the most, I think it's a very impressive, shiny toy. I really love the ability to gather and parse all of that data. I'm really struggling making a direct connection between anything in the strategic plan and the data that this toy is going to generate. And that's what I need help with. I need to understand what specific items that I see in the strategic plan need this data in order to be able to be sold or move forward more quickly. And so so until I see that, it's going to be difficult for me to support the plan. And I also think even if we do get to the point where we agree we want to do, we gotta get it for cheaper, Ken. We gotta let them prove to us why this data is valuable to us, or give us a chance to understand the value of it at a cost far less than $12,000.
Well, I won't argue with the value of the services until we can have a more robust discussion about how it can be used. I think I've laid out a case for its use. And once you start gathering data, you can always cancel. You can put in a contract and say you cancel. You don't like it, you can cancel the service. It's just like anything else. I'm not ready to run out and buy a new tractor. But what I am ready to do is to say we need to have the funds available to do those things. Otherwise, what we do is we get caught up in this, say, well, we can't do anything until we talk about the budget next year. And maybe we don't. I'm fine with that. But what my job is to bring to you is what new technology is available to help us do something that we've been unable to do. And if you look at the last two master plans have been done, everything's a guess about the number of operations, what type of operators are coming in and out of here, and how we build that case around that. And they're using formulas that aren't necessarily based in reality.
Any other comments or questions of Mr. Moen?
Question, do we have any idea about what percentage of the aircraft at Carson City that fly in and out have ADS-B?
I do not, but the FAA probably has some statistics on industry-wide, what that is. But as that 2020 date gets closer, there's more and more of that. And like I said, going forward, ADS-B is going to be the standard. Just like when transponders were first mandated, everybody said, oh, I'm not getting a transponder, nobody's gonna make me, and altitude encoding, that's ridiculous, why do I need that? Mode C, or you're killing me, you're gonna kill aviation. All that's just a smokescreen. The point is that this new technology, GPS, all that stuff is not going away. The way you gather data, the way you use data, that's the trick. Because you can gather tons of information. What do you do with it? And whether it's I have no interest in having a filing cabinet full of reports that we do nothing with. But I do have an interest to say, man, this guy comes to Carson City 12 times in the last 2 weeks out of Las Vegas. How do we service him better?
Just point of reference for you, Ken. FlightAware, I'm sure you've heard of that. If you are ADS-B equipped, VFR or IFR, it's picking you up. So if we're only looking for aircraft operations here at the airport, and that's solely what we're looking for, FlightAware already does it for free.
They do some of that, that's correct.
Well, they do.
No,
If you're ADS-B,
I'll look at, I'll definitely put that together as part of our whole research.
yeah, but if you're ADS-B equipped, they're picking you up on FlightAware, VFR, IFR, flight plan, no flight plan.
Well, they also have other aspects that they talk about, and some of that's not usable for airports of our nature, like live ATC, you can't get a frequency out of that. How do I do, that's one of the things I told member Hamilton that I'm gonna look into is how do we get, our CTAF frequency recorded on one of those systems for the same purpose. And to member Hamilton's point about safety, this system could add addition to that. Doesn't mean that it's real time, but he comes into me and says, so-and-so did this to me on final. Now we can find out at least who it is and have a dialogue versus what was his N number?
Member Harris?
Yeah, but he had blonde hair.
White eyes.
And I think this gets to the main question in my mind around this. First of all, I've got to say that for me, the amount of money we're talking into over a 2-year period, I'm not shocked. I'm not surprised at all that a company would want this kind of money, nor do I think it's an unusual request at that amount. Just, I don't think the numbers are shocking in any way. And I see the benefit from the standpoint of being able to track down the noise complaints, being able to track down the safety issues, and being able to get some counts on planes. But where it's so unclear to me is how much are we capturing and how much we're missing. And we've got the issues that Member Golden brought up in terms of people turning off tracking or not having the appropriate system or any of those kinds of things. And I just don't really have a sense for how much we're going to be able to pick up. And I think the data is useful. But here's my biggest concern is that incomplete data is misleading. And so we'll be able to look at our data and then we'll be able to tell ourselves it's not all there. And so until I would just like to have a much better sense of what the completeness is. For example, if somebody is flying around at night making all kinds of racket over somebody's house, what are the chances that system is going to tell us who that was? Or, will it do that, or will we go to the data and there just won't be anything there because it's a kind of airplane that you can't track for whatever reason? So, just to summarize, cost, not my concern so much as how usable will the data be and how much will it just kind of mislead us because it's not complete. So
I don't disagree with those assessments at all.
All right.
That's something that we definitely have to look at. And my suggestion to be today would not be make a motion other than to say, we can table this issue, but when we come to the budget, I'm going to ask that the board consider it in the budget so that we have the flexibility to manage that at some point in time. If our opinions change, they change, and then if we have more information and it's more complete and the board thinks it's worthy of its assessment, and I think that's something we do then. Go ahead.
Member Golden?
Ken, is your objective here, if you will, I think I'm understanding this, not so much who's flying overhead, but who's landing and who's departing? Am I correct in that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me make a suggestion to you. Give your counterpart in Truckee a call. And that would be, what's that? Kevin Smith. Give Kevin a call. Truckee installed, and I don't know if it's solar or if it's hardwired.
It's hardwired, MLAT, yeah.
You know what it is?
I've already spoken to it.
Okay, I was gonna, because that's what they use, and
Yeah.
it's,
They paid $1.2 million for that system.
is that, I don't, wait, no, this is not the same system.
They're upgrading the system now. They're paying for it
No,
out
this
of
is not the
pocket.
same system. We're not talking about the same
Oh,
thing.
you're talking about the one they use on the website with the noise abatements?
No,
site?
no.
Sorry.
They have, talk to Kevin, if not, I will when I see him next. Talk to him about their camera system.
Oh, okay.
They have a camera system
Right.
that is used to do exactly what you're
Right.
asking of.
Yeah, they record that, correct.
They do. And it's 100% effective. 100%. There's no lapses. I don't know if it's solar. I don't know if it's hardwired.
I think it's hardwired, but yeah.
At this airport, it would be even easier to do because there's only one runway.
But we tried the game cameras.
Right.
They're very
This
inefficient.
This is different. I can
right.
take a picture of one for
No,
you.
I'm familiar with it.
Okay. And it's motion sensor.
Yeah.
And it captures, the way it's set up, it literally captures the tail number as the aircraft is passing by.
Right.
And if that's what we're trying to do, that may be a more,
Well, you have to gather the data. So you have to take
Right.
the film, and then you got to pull the film and get information. And then how you record it, whether you put it in a spreadsheet or whatever, how
Right.
robust it is. That was a rudimentary system they put in place for maybe traffic count, but also for the noise issues and that sort of thing.
exactly what it was
And
for.
catching landing fees or whatever
well, it
else
was
they do with
nighttime operations was
Right.
really what they were looking
Right.
at.
Right.
But my point is, that gives you 100% capture rate.
If
IFR,
they're-
VFR.
If they're working, they're a mechanical issue. I'm not gonna, I don't think it's, right now, I know we've gone really long on this issue.
Okay, I'm
So
done.
I don't wanna debate the merits of all these different aspects of doing this. But what I'm saying is, as part of our process, strategic planning, master planning, and that information's knowledge. So I brought this forward for this purpose, and I think we've accomplished that. And so with your indulgence, I would suggest that we table that information for now, and then we can move on to the next item. I know that's taken a lot of time, so.
Just like to say.
Member Hamilton?
Say one thing, that whatever we approve for a budget, we can modify it. It doesn't necessarily be the exact company or the exact plant, product, or whatever it is. Some kind of a budget to move forward and not be specific about product and whatever, because I'm very concerned also about the Big Brother thing and who's taxing who and who knows what. And that's obviously a other side of the
For the
story.
little brother.
Just to comment on that, and it's, a lot of it is a policy issue. What do we share with who? And basically, our policy should be, we don't share it with anybody unless we get a court order, something to that effect, okay? So,
And I can tell you at this point that I don't feel comfortable going ahead with the recommended motion. However, I would feel comfortable with approving the staff to continue investigation into this and at some point, and include the amount that was asked for in the budget, and then at some time during the next fiscal year, be able to go forward with something depending upon what the findings are and what the cost allocation for whatever system we put in might be. And then the rest would revert. So, if we don't have any other discussion, I see Mr. Rogers has something to say, but in lieu of something that's going to change my mind, that would be the motion that I would request, Mr. Rogers.
I notice on the budget that we list that, the line item is listed as arrow tracking. Doesn't list a specific company.
And that's just the draft budget. Yeah.
And I think, I think that a motion that says that, hey, we're going to put a line item, add a line item to the budget to do better tracking, do better tracking of airport use, of the usage of our airport, I don't see any problem at all with that, and we can continue the discussion about the specifics as we go through the year.
Any further comments? Hearing none, is there any public comment on this item? Hearing none, I would accept a motion to approve that airport staff continue with their investigations into the aero tracking system, and that the amount as indicated in the request be included in our budget for this upcoming year, and that in future meetings that the aircraft tracking and reporting system will be brought back as an agenda item in the event that we decide, or can, so that we can decide what it might be that we want to use and then allocate the appropriate amount to pay for it.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Harris. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Rogers. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Chair Law, may I make a request?
Yes, sir.
In our audience, we have Linda Ritter about the master plan. So I kind of feel bad for her that she had to listen to a lot about that, but I would like to suggest that we move to that agenda item and allow her to make her presentation and.
Do I have any objection to moving that item,
You mean strategic plan, Ken?
the strategic plan?
Yes.
What did I say?
Oh,
One of those plans.
A plan. I'm going to use the restroom.
okay. We will have a 5-minute break and then we will renew with that item. authority to business, and we will move to item F5 on the agenda for discussion and possible action, provide update on the strategic planning process, review and discuss draft strategic plan. Mr. Moen, would you like to introduce Ms. Ritter?
Thank you very much. As you know, the board has undergone the strategic planning process. We went through the workshop, and the culmination of the workshop is what Ms. Ritter has presented in her first draft. I think we got that out to you about, late last week, so hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to look at it. I thought it was an excellent first document, and her and I did work on a few things prior to getting to that stage, but I believe that we've captured the essence of where we want to go, so now it's a matter of refining it, and I'll allow Mr. to walk through the presentation that she prepared for us.
Go ahead and state your name and proceed.
Good evening, Linda Ritter Consulting, and I'm pleased to be back with you. After we did the workshop, Ken and I took all of the information we gathered and developed a draft, and I say draft, strategic plan. One of the first things we did was talk about mission and vision statements. As you recall, I had you go through and give us some key words. And from that, we did develop a mission statement. Let me read it to you. The mission of the Carson City Airport is to maintain and improve aviation infrastructure and facilities, providing safe, secure, and convenient access to the national airspace system while supporting state government and economic activity in the Nevada state capital and be a valuable member of the Carson City community. Okay, so that's the first draft of the mission statement. And I offer this to you, anything that the board would like to see, the authority would like to see different. That's what I'm here today for, is to get any of your comments, anything you'd like to see tweaked, because this is your plan, and we want to make sure that it meets your needs and gives you a plan for the future. So any comments on that mission statement before we go further? Sure.
Read that
Member Barrett.
The last part, while supporting state government and economic activity of the state, Nevada state capital, and to be a valuable member of the Carson City community. Okay.
Just a general comment on the process. I mean, the airport manager sent out a request for comments. I was crazy enough to make them.
Oh, okay.
So I actually edited the document heavily and put a lot of suggestions in there for brevity and all kinds of things. So
Okay.
I'm not going to bring any of that up tonight.
If we
It's
already have your
available.
comments, that's
So,
great.
yeah.
All right. Very good. This is for anybody else then, that if you want to give me those comments, I'll take them right now, otherwise.
Maybe I didn't include this in my initial discussion. When I provided them the draft, board members, I offered them to redline their comments into the draft.
Okay.
Or to make comments referenced by paragraph.
Okay.
So instead of going through line item tonight, perhaps it's more efficient that we gather that data and then we share back with you.
Sure,
on that-
sure, because
on that matter.
what I wanted to do tonight, maybe I should outline that, is just go over the mission and vision statements, because those are really critical. And then talk about really 2 pages on the document, which is the strategy map. That strategy map, which shows your mission, your vision, and your goals and your values are something that should last over time. When you get to the next section, which is your strategic initiatives, that's something that you should revisit on a regular basis. That's something you should revisit when you do your budget, because that's going to talk about those activities that are going to happen to support those goals that are listed in that other page, okay? So that's the reason I had stopped for the mission, vision and mission. I wanted to make sure that you're okay with that, okay? And let me just do the vision, then we'll move into that next section. The vision of the Carson City Airport Authority is to reflect the Nevada state capital by being the premier general aviation airport in the northern Nevada / Eastern California region, known for its exceptional facilities, services, support, and advancement of aviation to the benefit of the regional economy and industry. One thing that we picked up during the workshop was the importance that the authority members felt to economic development and industry, and also to promote aviation to future generations. Those were 2 real keys looking forward that at least I picked up from our discussions. So if anybody has any. When we get down, the values are something we didn't talk about at the workshop, but your airport manager has developed some. Those really reflect how him and his staff how the airport in general will operate. And that's where you came up with he came up with the flexibility, accountability, incorruptibility, and reliability. So I didn't know if the board had anything to offer beyond that, but I felt that that was important. You could do an entire workshop just on values. But he's got a small staff, so him and his staff could come up with that list quite handily.
I think that definition is minute. I don't think it's small. The one thing I would add with that is because of the small staff that we have, internal controls are almost impossible to do. And that is why the integrity of our staff is so critical. Because yes, we have a CPA who overlooks, and we have a bookkeeper that comes in and takes a look at things. And I can honestly say from personal experience that since Mr. Moen has come on board, he has kept me involved in everything that he has done. And I expect that he will do that once I am no longer the chairman for the new chairman. But it is critical to me that that is a focus and a value that is worth more than money. Because without it, we put all of our assets in jeopardy.
True. Okay. The strategy map, now, the way this works is you have your vision, your mission, and that vision sets where you want to go. Those strategic goals were all established based on how you want to reach that vision. And they are maintain airport infrastructure in top condition. You want to provide for the safety and security airport users, support economic activity in the region. That was a very large section when we went into the analysis. Maintain positive relationships with the community, promote aviation to current and future generations, and maintain financial stability. Those I see as goals that are going to last you quite a while. You may add, you may reword those, but that's something that I think is critical for the airport, and that's something that we picked up from the workshop. From those goals, and did anybody have any comments on those goals? From those goals, then we developed, yes, sir.
I did make this comment to Ken, and I think we could probably, one of the things I think we should try and do is to enhance our ability to be a safety, disaster recovery, a focus for the whole region. We're the state capital. That's one of the areas that I think we can really develop good relationships with our community, police, fire. Emergency response would be a good.
Okay.
And I think we should try and build on that a little bit more to help us all do a lot of the things we want to do.
One of the things I might ask the members to do for the convenience of our secretary is when you do start to speak, would you please state your name so that she doesn't have to pick up the 5 different male voices rather than use the names, because that will make it easier for her. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? When we did just a brief history on the airport, and then going into the specifics of the strategic goals and those initiatives. For each section, I laid out survey results and other information we received, as well as the SWOT analysis. And the SWOT analysis is what was done at the workshop. So we included that in the plan. Sometimes I've seen plans just include those somewhere in an appendix somewhere, but I've wanted to at least show you this is how we came to those initiatives. There is a justification and there's a reason behind each one of those initiatives. Now, we could certainly put that back in an appendix and just keep those initiatives up on top, but I did, for that first draft, want to take you through the logic behind all of these initiatives. So for those initiatives, for maintaining the airport infrastructure in top condition, we've got develop immediate and long-term capital improvement capital plan. And for each one of the initiatives, your airport manager provided a description of what he saw that initiative as meaning, and that's going to give you good information as to how that's going to be implemented in the future. Okay? Yes, sir.
Linda, Michael Golden. You know, when I reviewed this, I was very impressed with your draft, but there was one shortcoming, in my opinion, a priority, if you will, that I felt needs some revision. Any successful business venture needs to grow its customer base. You either grow or you die.
Right.
It's pretty simple. And this airport is faced with a lot of challenges, some that we see today and some that we can foresee in the future. It is, I think, a higher priority. You've listed growing the number of based aircraft towards the very bottom of your strategic initiatives. And I feel that it's a much higher priority, and that really growing the customer base is what this airport and this airport authority needs to do to maintain financial stability. Because without financial stability, all of these other initiatives don't go anywhere. They don't gain any traction.
And those listed initiatives and goals is not in a priority order, and I could certainly do that and put that.
Well, understood.
The financial stability up on top.
When I see something towards the end of a section, and I know you didn't do this intentionally, don't mistake me, I'm not accusing you of that, but it diminishes the value of the item.
Right. The reason that often you'll see those, the financial stability is, I guess I look at it different. It's kind of the base. You got to have that at the bottom. But I certainly understand, and if the authority wants to put these in a priority order, to give the airport manager some direction on which items need more priority, as he's work as the next step after we get your comments, is he will then develop an action plan.
Yeah.
Steps for implementation. how
On
he's
the
gonna
whole
get it
thing,
done.
that's my only comment.
Okay.
But we have to have emphasis, that's all. Got to have emphasis on growing the customer base.
Okay,
Okay?
got it. Okay. Like I said, we can certainly, when it comes to the implementation plan, you're probably going to see that in order of maybe priority and also activities that are going to happen. But we can certainly look at reversing that and putting the financial stability piece on top, because that's a good point. You're not going to get anywhere unless you have that. So for the infrastructure is developing that capital improvement plan for the safety and security of airport users, the nighttime instrument approach project, going forward with that, and then looking at an all-terrain runway to see if that could be developed. In the area of economic activity, and that's where we got a lot of feedback during the workshop, was first of all, looking at commercial development on College Parkway frontage, and specifically a restaurant, because we saw from the survey that was a very popular item that people supported. Going forward with feasibility study on commercial passenger services, working with tourism officials to promote the airport, looking for opportunities for overnight hangars for visitors, identifying areas for new hangars through the master planning process, which is going on right now. Investigate cooperative marketing opportunities with hangar owners, actively market. So there's a lot of marketing going on in this economic area of the plan. Research renaming the Carson City Airport to the Carson Tahoe Airport. So those are the initiatives. And again, each one of those initiatives will have then in the next draft, we'll have the implementation plan. How is the airport going to go forward on some of these things? In maintaining positive relationships with the community, looking for opportunities to hold additional events, because we did get a lot of feedback from folks about that. An RFP for the restaurant on College Parkway, and improving the appearance of the airport frontage. It's a very long frontage you have on a busy street in Carson City. Promoting aviation to current and future generations. Again, the events that you hold at the airport are going to support that. Looking at special events when tourism things are happening in town and the town's full anyway, get folks to the airport, and creating opportunities to showcase the latest in aviation to area youth. And then that financial stability, growing the number of airport-based aircraft, market and develop requests for proposals for commercial and aviation-related vacant property. You are fortunate that you do have that vacant property. And then something that I discovered when I went back to look at the financial piece is the city property taxes is not codified at this point. It's something that the city writes a check and gives you, but there's nothing in code or any of the agreements. I know the agreement with the city is coming due for a renewal, and you might want to definitely put that in there to make sure that's codified, and you don't have a board that comes in and decides, now you don't need that money. It's very, very important to you, I know, looking at your budget. So those are, I'm not going to go over everything in this report. Like I said, the initiatives are listed with what those initiatives mean. It includes a background on where all of this came from, what input you got versus by way of the survey, as well as through your workshop looking at your SWOT analysis. So I will leave that with you, and please accept any comments.
Well, I can say that I honestly appreciate all the work that you have done, and I know we're not ready for a motion of any kind tonight. What I would like to do is direct you to continue to work with Ken and on the input that you've gotten from board members and so forth, and
Okay.
Development of the introductory letter and that sort of thing.
Yes, we do have a place for and it can
Right.
be the chairperson, it can be the manager. One thing, let me comment, there's another section on here called performance measures. And when your earlier discussion did interest me, because you need to have some way of measuring whether you're achieving what you wanted to achieve. I mean, there's got to be some way of taking a look at that. And right now, if you don't have any way of knowing what that activity is at the airport, it'd be good to have that, to know whether you need to put more in infrastructure, some type of heads up. I mean, I've used performance measures not just after the fact, but it can give you an early indicator of needing to take some action. So having some of that data would be important.
Quantification of data is always an important thing. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you. I thought you captured all of the data that was gathered very well, thoroughly. I really appreciate that. I definitely would be a person that would vote for moving the SWOT analysis pages into an appendix.
Sure.
So that there's a chance that somebody besides us will read the report. 33 pages is not going to happen.
It surprised me it came out that long.
I'm hoping that you're going to stay with this project until the action plans are created and the performance measures are created. Am I correct in that assumption?
I will be around. Yeah, as far as the implementation plan, that's up to your airport staff.
And the board, obviously.
And the board, but he will present that to you. And I'd love to be involved with the performance measure side, because that's something that I'm quite passionate about.
Any other
Or
comments?
you're signed up, yes. That's what I'm taking, and we're going to take that help, right, Ken?
That's obviously for the board to decide, but I'm happy to work with Ms. Ritter here, and I've worked very well together on this. Can I elaborate real quickly on a couple of things?
Please
When we
do.
went down the initiatives and stuff, that's all coming from the data from the workshop and the feedback from the surveys. So where we really need to go with our review on this, like was suggested by Mr. Harris and Mr. Rogers, is where we're going to move some of that stuff, put some of that in the appendix, put this stuff that we want at the top. And what was mentioned, I think, at the last meeting was really my performance goals for the next year are going to come out of this. So if the board comes back and say, hey, these are the top 3 things we're going to do, and this is how we want to accomplish them, and then how we're going to implement them, that's what we're really going to do with this document. So please go through this, figure out where the real priorities are, growing our customer base, doing an RFP, acquiring land, doing all those sort of things. That's where we're really heading with that piece. So don't get hung up on some of the minutia, because we can clean that up, but really focus on where we want to go as an organization and keep those limited enough that that's something we can accomplish.
Yeah, and in my view, having things that are achievable is far better than having things that, no matter what you do, you're not going to get there. So, any other comments or questions of Ms. Ritter? Well, I thank you again for all your work and your work with Mr. Moen, and we will agendize this for a meeting probably in July or August. And by that time, we should have it pretty well planned out and nailed down. So hopefully, all the work you will do will come to fruition and we'll be able to go forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number F2 for discussion and possible action benefit plan for airport manager. I would appreciate it if Member Harris would review his submission to the board.
I will do that. This is Member Harris. I will do that as soon as I find it. You'll recall from the last meeting of the authority that there were some outstanding issues on the airport manager's compensation. We handled the base salary. There were some other things that that were left open, and I'm just addressing two things that are outstanding now. So one of them is regarding the medical benefits, and there's a agreement, there's information in the employment agreement about the option of taking a payment in lieu of the coverage, and it was not clear exactly where that number came from. So I did some research with the state, was able to tie it back to the employee-only base subsidy in the PEBP consumer-driven health plan for plan year 2018. That contribution rate is changing as of July 1, and I think it's appropriate to follow that as it changes. So that would mean that beginning in July, we would move that that contribution, that payment to 588.11. So that's what's come out of that little bit of research. And the other thing I'd suggest is that we just follow this practice going forward. It seems to make the most sense, and that's the reason I put a little bit of detail in here so that we could come back to this year after year. The other one was just regarding the the vacation benefits. In the employment agreement, it was 3 weeks of vacation per year. And so the airport manager asked us to take a look at that. My experience is that a career level vacation benefit is pretty much a minimum of 4 weeks of vacation. And my little bit of research on that in terms of public agencies and that sort of thing bears that out. So my proposal is that we move it from 3 weeks to 4 weeks, just in recognition of the service. But that would be where we would hold it. It would remain at 4 weeks year after year. I think that'd be a competitive level of vacation benefit. That's all I have. I think we'll need some sort of motion if we want to do this.
Any questions of Mr. Harris on his presentation? Mr. Golden?
Not so much question, Mr. Harris, but a question of the airport authority on intent. And I want to take Mr. Moen out of the equation for this discussion. Let's say airport manager, because Ken's not going to be the airport manager for an eternity. You can be.
That sounds like a kind of hell to me.
The point being is, I have a little concern here. Again, nothing to do with Ken. Okay, the payment in lieu is not the issue. It's the vacation benefits. When I read through this in preparation for the meeting, my experience has been that that kind of vacation benefit is available after so many years of service. It's not something that you get immediately coming into a position. And so intent-wise, is it the intent of the airport authority to have this established after so many years? Would a successive manager just get 4 years of 4 weeks. 4 weeks of vacation pay on hire? I'm trying to understand where we're going with that.
So I think what you're asking is, are we setting some sort of precedent that would, and my answer is, I don't think so. The reason I say that is that when we hired Ken, we had negotiations with him, if you will, around the base salary and all these other things, including vacation. And at that point, then we made an offer around a vacation for 3 weeks. And I mean, that's the precedent that we sit down and we negotiate what it's going to be. And regarding your experience in terms of people earning vacation, that's absolutely right for somebody who is fairly short in their career. For someone who is at what I call career level, it's very common for employers to offer full vacation benefits so that they don't lose the previous benefit of service, particularly when that service directly benefits the organization, as in somebody who's worked at another airport. So that benefit's not at all uncommon. And as far as setting any kind of precedent, I don't think we would, because we would be negotiating a deal, if you will. And here's the thing about that negotiations. The next person that comes to us may not give a hoot about vacation. They may want more put in this bucket and less put in that bucket. And I think that flexibility is important to be able to attract good people, to be able to shape the offer so that it's the most attractive.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Harris, did we, in any of the route documents that we used when we made an offer, when we were out looking for an airport manager, is there any like guidelines based, is there any information about what the range of possible vacation benefits could be? And as a follow-up, it's like, is there anywhere in that, and any documentation going in the past or going forward that will codify that we have agreed that we're going to use this particular approach to doing payments in lieu of benefits, health benefits?
The first, well, to answer the second one first, this is all that's codified. Okay, this basically explains, this is how we got there before, because I didn't find any place that it was recorded, but I found that number. It was in the state information regarding employee contributions and state contributions. So this is the best I could do in terms of saying this is where you'll find this number, okay? Regarding any kind of data about what an airport manager's vacation benefits would be, there is no such animal. Those kind of details at the benefit level aren't recorded by down to the responsibility level. So it's much more general information.
Mr. Rogers.
Is there a way to put is there a way to put this someplace where we can find it again 5 or 10 years from now?
That's the reason I sent a memo in.
Mr. Takis, I assume that we will do an addendum to the employment agreement that will outline what these changes will be.
That's certainly one way we can do it. Just to respond to that, everything Member Harris said is accurate from my recollection, including the source of that number. And we pulled the source of that number before we even looked at our current airport manager. It was just the surrogate for if someone brings their own insurance, what would be the compensation we should pay them, because we're not going to be paying for the Public Employees Benefit Program insurance. In terms of finding this codified someplace, that ain't going to happen. With 2 employees, we're not going to go to that much trouble. But I think the chairman's idea of at least memorializing it in some kind of amendment or document so that it can be found again makes total sense. And so I'll put something together. It should be fairly simple.
Thank you. That would be my suggestion, because if we put that into our next meeting's minutes, saying that this is what we have added to the contract, then that gives someplace people could refer to it. And it won't get lost in the wash as it has in the past. So I think that that's probably worthwhile.
Just for the board's information, the way I'm taking these board memos, they're all dated. They all have a number assigned to them. You'll go into a spreadsheet and it'll have the topic of what the memo is. And then you'll be able to archive that data and be able to pull it out. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the input from Mr. Harris regarding Mr. Moen's compensation package? Hearing none, is there any public comment on it? Hearing none. I would accept a motion to approve the increases as outlined and to continue the PEB rate into the future for any changes that would come in his contract. Also, I would add to that an increase in the vacation benefit from 3 weeks per year to 4 weeks per year, both beginning on July 1st, 2019. The vacation to create parity with accepted career level norms, and such increases to be reflected in paragraphs 3.2 and 3.3 respectively in his employment agreement. I would take a motion to that effect. I have a motion by Member Golden. Do I have a second?
Hamilton, second.
And I have Member Hamilton as a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? None heard. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item F3 for discussion and possible action, equipment rental agreement for John Deere 5125R tractor for 5.5 months. Mr. Moen.
Thank you, Chair Law. As everybody knows, we do have a nice piece of yard art sitting in our infield. It was a very unfortunate incident, and also unfortunate was that tractor was not included under any of our comprehensive insurance coverage. The only 3 items that we have additional comprehensive insurance coverage are on the AWAS, the fence, and the airport gates. The snow plow and the truck, the utility truck is covered under its own insurance policy, but the other items are not. So in light of the tractor issue, I also wanted to, as I've informed Chair Law, I have asked AJ Gallagher to conduct a risk management review of all our policies. I did this before the incident, so the information's come back on some of the suggestions they made, and that's going to be provided at the next board meeting as one of the agenda items. So I don't want to get in that too deeply, other than to rest the board assured that risk management was a concern of mine and is developed not just on the airport side, but also on the tenant side. As you know, a lot of the insurance criteria were written into old leases, and the Title 19 allowed the airport to make those adjustments over time. But however, it has created some disagreement among the tenant base about what those limits and levels are. So I think as we go through this risk management, we can formalize the process, show that we've utilized professionals in the field of aviation insurance, and they've given us some examples of what are considered industry standards. So we'll be able to bring that to full circle. Now under the tractor. The tractor is a useful piece of equipment for a couple of things besides mowing brush. It's also been used for clearing out ditches, hauling material, and other ancillary uses. But its primary concern is it does have what they call a PTO connection for the mower that's drug along the back of the tractor. One of the things that I identified early on with Gary over the winter was that the sagebrush had grown incredibly tall, especially around the runways and the RPZ to the north, to the west of runway approach end, runway 9. And I also noticed some large rocks out there. And so I had him during the winter season go out and remove those, and then when able, go out there and start doing some of the mowing. The areas around the runway and taxiway surfaces are supposed to be smooth, rut-free, and obstacle-free unless they're there by form or function. In other words, runway lights, signage, that sort of stuff could be there, but they're on frangible couplings. Things like large rocks, divots, and stuff that could cause a loss of control if an aircraft experience an excursion for the runway needs to be removed. So we need utility type equipment to do that. The tractor we have was purchased several years ago. It was used at the time it was purchased. Gary wanted to tell me that somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 plus the equipment, so $47,000 was invested in that, and that it's an 85 horsepower diesel tractor. And one of the other key components was at the time it had a bunch of hours on it. I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 4,000. So it was well used at the time of purchase. And I believe that in our earlier discussions, I talked about equipment replacement for capital equipment, and that we need to come up with a plan for that. The snowplow is not going to last forever. That tractor and utility trucks certainly aren't. And so we need to identify that and come up with, well, it's happened sooner than I would wish. We put about $5,000 in the tractor last year for a couple of repairs, and that kind of raised the red flag to me about how much money we would sink into this piece of equipment. So what I asked Gary to do was to research a replacement, and I'm not interested in buying a new tractor for a couple of reasons. One, it's a large capital investment. Two, I don't want to buy a new piece of equipment, stick it outside, and not have a place to maintain it and keep it out of the weather. So my thought going forward right now is to have a piece of equipment that we can get through the season with. Gary had done a lot of work on removing debris up till that incident. The primary area we still have is along Bravo, on the east side of Bravo to the fence line, and then also along the triangle. And it's not so important about the triangle because we don't have a lot of activity in there, but it can become a fire hazard, as we saw. One thing we did experience was that when the fire department did respond, that stuff was fairly wet still, so it didn't just take off. But if this had been late August, September, that some of that brush was 4 to 6 feet tall and would be a major factor. I took Board of Supervisor Giomi on a airport tour, and one of the first things he said to me is, "You better remove some of that brush." And I said, "Oh, we're on it. We're already doing it. It's a part of our plan." And a concern of mine right now, and I'm not sure that the tractor will certainly solve that 100%, is the area to the southeast around Bowers Lane and Apollo. Some of that area is not really accessible. There's a lot of rock in there. There's trees. Right now it's very wet because the creek flows through there. So that's not going to solve all of our problem. But what we can do is to finish some of the work we started, and we're going to have the problem as it does dry out and the stuff starts to grow back, to keep it mowed during the season. So I personally, if we're going to buy a piece of equipment, I want to buy something that's a little bit more versatile than the tractor. I mean, it does have the bucket. It would be nice if we could put a broom on it or a snow blower or some other type of attachments that make it more functional. And there's some equipment out there, and I'm in at this immediate juncture, I'd like to take our time to explore that. Renter equipment was one of the first places that Gary contacted. It just so happens this tractor was fairly new, was up in Reno for snow removal during the winter, and now they're returning it back. And the guy goes, "Hey, just so happens we have a 110 horsepower tractor to fit your need, and we could drop it off on the way back instead of taking it all the way to Urington." And so we're like, "Oh, hold your horses. We got to go through the process to get there." But what they're proposing is to rent it. The figure $11,080 or I think I'm confusing, $12,000 was based upon a number of hours that they're allocating us, which is like 50 a month through the 5.5 months at $23 an hour. So my first question with that is, I can't hire somebody with a tractor to come out and mow our stuff for $23 an hour. There's no way. So the other piece, the renter said, "Well, if you decide to buy it, we would take that rental rate and apply it to the purchase of the tractor." I go, "Okay, well, that's interesting. It might not be what we want to do, but we wouldn't necessarily be throwing our money down a hole. We would actually be able to apply that to the purchase if we're interested in that." So as I've expressed my feeling about a more versatile piece of equipment, so I don't really look at that as in the benefit column, other than if the board said, "You know what? Let's not wait. Let's just get a piece of equipment and be done with it." Then at least we'd have an option. We've already contacted a case dealer out of Wellington, Nevada. We're looking at a different piece of equipment he has. It's a little cheaper. Might be some variance in the horsepower, but to purchase it, we got to go through the NRS purchasing process and go out to public bid and all that. So really for the lease, we only need one quote because we're under the dollar amount, I believe, which is 25 grand. So we can do that without it, but we are exploring the other options. I am going to get a quote from a third dealer on a different piece of equipment, so we'll have 3 quotes. We'll be able to determine ballpark on figures and equipment usage, and then we can get through the season, and then as we go through our process, we can worry about that. We did identify in the airport improvement program and plan a replacement snowplow with an SRE building, so maybe that's the time that we really identify a tractor replacement. That would be done through AIP money, which means it would only cost us 6%. So the cost of operating a tractor, the $11,000 or $12,000, we're probably in the ballpark. You know, we probably spent fuel last year and maintenance and whatnot, somewhere in that region to operate the tractor. We put new blades on the mower this year. So as long as that mower can still be adapted to the current tractor, we don't have to buy a new blade. So we're in the ballpark. So the what I want to present to the board is we don't want to say we're going to take the John Deere tractor. What we want to do is leave the money in the budget to allow us to go through our process, figure out what's the right piece of equipment, much like this aero tracking piece, and then allow us to make that decision as it is appropriate. The board can also have the option to say, you know, come back with us what a purchase might look like. And then we can present that information at our future board meeting. But as we approach the budget season, I think it's appropriate to identify funds in the budget to be able to accomplish our task. So that's all I have, Chair Law.
Any questions for Mr. Moen? Member Rogers.
I like the idea of the rental. I just wanted to ask, I mean, we're paying an hourly rental essentially, right? $23 an hour, you said. So if we don't use it for 50, the projected 50 hours a month, we don't pay that?
We can
or-
negotiate that. I think what they did when they came up with the fee for the 5.5 months was based on a certain number of hours used. And it may not be worth it to them. They may determine it's not worth it to them if we rent it and then we don't use it. Well, if we're not going to use it, then let's not rent it. That's kind of where I'm going with it. And I know Gary, you know, he's been there almost 9 years. He knows what time takes and equipment takes to do that. So, you know, I'm kind of basing our experience now on what Gary's telling me. And I trust his judgment. So if we get to the point where we come to an agreement, we're going to go negotiate, the board says, hey, go talk to renter or whoever the vendor is, we can make that stipulation. Hey, if we don't put 250 hours on it over the season, you know, what kind of deal can we make? So I have no problem negotiating that.
And of course, on the other side of that argument, we don't want to have to pay a penalty if we use it for too many hours.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like leasing a car, you don't want to, you know, if we get to the point where we've done all our work and we put 249 hours on it, you know, we can shut it down for the season.
Okay, and that was Mr. Rogers. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I would accept a motion to approve airport staff to identify and lease a tractor replacement for the airport mowing season not to exceed $12,000 for the remainder of the season. Do I have a motion?
This is Member Harris. I move.
I have a motion. Motion from Mr. Harris and a second by Mr. Barrett. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Rogers.
The motion was slightly different than what I thought I heard Ken say. I thought Ken didn't want to specify it to be a specific model of tractor. He just wanted to specify that we add a line item to the budget for a certain amount.
Right, to identify and lease. So not necessarily the one that's on this paper, but that he continue his research and locate one that will solve our problem for the mowing season. Yes, that's correct. So any further discussion on the motion? None heard? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? None heard, motion carried. Yeah, we have one more item. And then we'll do that. Okay, moving on to item F6 for discussion and possible action, election of the fiscal year 19 through 21 Airport Authority officers, president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. This is my item. Over the past few weeks, I have talked to several of our members, and it is my feeling that we've come up with a slate that is going to be useful for the board and will lead us into the next 2 years effectively. I did talk to Mr. Takis, who suggested there had been an amendment to AB 406 that if we did this, I needed to run another 4 years. And I said that wasn't going to happen. So I would open the floor for nominations for board members. And at this time, I would accept a nomination for chairman. Do I have a nominee, a nominor, whatever this is called?
Paul Hamilton, I nominate Michael Golden for chairman of the Carson City Airport Authority.
Thank you, Member Hamilton. Member Michael Golden is nominated. Are there any further nominations for the position of chairman? Hearing none, is there any public comment as far, or nominations from the public for chairman? Seeing none. Without objection, nomination for the chairman is closed. Mr. Hamilton.
I nominate Bradley Harris for vice chairman of the Carson City Airport Authority.
Thank you, Member Hamilton. Member Bradley Harris is nominated. Are there further nominations for the position of vice chairman? Are there any further nominations for the vice chairman from the public? Hearing none, without objection, nomination for vice chairman is closed. Mr. Hamilton. Thank you, Member Hamilton. Member John Rogers is nominated. Are there any further nominations for the position of Secretary Treasurer? None heard. Are there any further nominations for Secretary Treasurer from the public? None heard. Without objection, nominations for Secretary Treasurer are closed. The nominations being closed, I would accept a motion to accept the slate of officers for the upcoming 2 years for this authority. Any public comment on the motion? None heard. I would accept a motion to accept the slate of officers as nominated for the upcoming 2-year term.
So moved.
Moved by Member Barrett. Do I have a second?
Paul Hamilton, second.
I have a motion from Mr. Barrett, a second from Mr. Hamilton. Any discussion on the motion? None heard. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? None heard. The slate is accepted. The slate being accepted, I would accept a motion to elect Member Golden as chairman, Member Harris as vice chairman, and Member Rogers as secretary treasurer for the upcoming 2-year period. Is there any discussion on the motion? None heard. Any public comment on the motion? None heard. Do I have a motion to approve the slate of officers as nominated for the upcoming 2-year term? Member Barrett has moved. Do I have a second?
Hamilton, second.
Mr. Hamilton has seconded the motion. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? None heard. Motion carried. Thank you, gentlemen, and I wish you great success. All right, now we will go back to the budget item. And that would be item F4. And F4 for discussion and possible action, public hearing on CCAA budget fiscal year 19 and 20 as outlined by our CPA. And I would now accept a motion to approve the final tentative budget as the final budget for fiscal year 1920 and authorize staff to make the approved changes, filings, and to certify and transmit the same to the Nevada Department of Taxation by June 1st, 2019 with the guidance of the authority's CPA. I have a motion from Member Rogers. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from, Member Barrett. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. None heard. Motion carries. Thank you very much. And now we will move to the airport engineers report. Mr. Moen.
Thank you, Chairman. And real quick, before we move on from the budget, as you recall early on, we have to do the budget augmentation next month.
Yes.
So I will survey everybody about a date and time. We can do it on teleconference. Anybody in the public wants to attend, they'll be able to come to the airport offices and listen into the call. So that's our plan, is to do it in that manner. And then, but I will need signatures on that document based on the motion. So if you're gonna be out of town, please let us know so that I can run around and get signatures. We should be able to email it. You can sign it. If you're out of town, I could drive up and meet you for lunch, Mr. Golden, if that's necessary for your schedule, whatever it'll take. So we'll get it figured out. And then to go on to the engineer's report.
Before you do that,
Yes, ma'am.
I know the augmentation's going to be handled that way, but we do have
Yes,
the
before you leave
document
tonight,
tonight.
got to get signatures.
We need to make
Yep.
sure everybody on the board signs this document. Mr. Moen will have the original, so before you leave tonight, make sure that your signature's affixed to that document. Go ahead, Mr. Moen.
Okay, thank you. Briefly on the engineer's report, I have what was submitted by Armstrong, which they are working on the design of the fence and the access gate issues. And I do want to inform the board that unfortunately, we were not a recipient of supplemental grant funding to acquire the acreage east of Taxway Bravo. I did look thoroughly through the list of the 700 and some odd $1 million budgets, and almost all of them were pavement related. Reno ended up getting 10 million for runway improvement, and Hawthorne got like 1.2 million for some taxiway work. But those are the only two in the state. And then in hindsight, I'm kicking myself. We should have submitted another issue, maybe like on the SRE building or something that may have scored a little bit higher. But, I didn't think of that at the time. So next time, as that opportunity arises, we'll approach that. So we'll have to have future discussion about that acreage and how we might best see fit to obtain that. The other issue under engineering is I had a conference call today with Atkins and Q&D Construction. We have set a tentative date to come back out and complete the taxiway rehab project. Tentatively, it's May 30th and 31st, and then the first Monday, I think, is the 3rd of June. And that Monday will primarily be painting and striping. The first phase would be the areas around the connectors to the runway that we discussed before. So it'll be 1 day closure between the hours of 8 and 4 p.m. So we want to make sure that we have that identified and that we make proper arrangements. That is going to impact Mountain West certainly, so we'll have to figure out some ways to minimize that issue. And they're going to try to do as much alpha on that first phase as they can. So therefore, the second phase would include the north stuff. Access to Mountain West would be open, all that second phase. And then the striping can be done where they're allowed to pull the equipment back from the runway or any other area based upon activity. They did complete the saw cut and patch on Bravo by the fuel farm. So that's been done. And they did a nice job on that. So that's all I have for the engineer's report.
Thank you. And now can you continue with the airport manager's report?
Everybody's probably had the chance to read it, so I won't walk it through line by item. I will highlight a couple things. I'm going to be out of town the first week of June with the FAA conference, so I'll be available by email or phone during that. period. The latter part of June, I will be in Boston for the AAAE conference. I will also be available for email and phone calls on that. But to highlight a couple of things, that we have been approved for the MV Energy rebate for the south ramp lighting. That was in part of our budget item. We won't know the dollar amount until that's all done. The MV Energy has submitted to the FAA to map and mark those utility lines, especially around Duck Hill, as you descend into Carson where the helicopter hit last year. And so once those get mapped, and they'll be on the sectional, as well as they're going to put delineators on them. So I thought that was two safety issues that were really important. One public relations side and support of our strategic plan about the next generation of aviators. With Chair Law's approval, the Airport Authority sponsored a $250 scholarship to one of the members of the Pathways to Aviation process. And so we're hoping to build on that relationship with them. And we're also bringing in an intern. And this is really a community piece. The Airport Authority with 2 staff members would have a very hard time bringing in an intern to manage that process for the 5 weeks that was scheduled. So with a little bit of out-of-the-box thinking and contacting our tenants on the airfield, we're going to give this individual experience they might not otherwise get. And they're going to intern at 1 week at the airport, 1 week with Carson Aviation Services, 1 week with Cactus Air Force, and 1 week with Mountain West Aviation. So it's a thorough team effort by the airport community to really provide this individual with some unique experience and opportunity. We're going to get a chance to interview him next week. And so all the entities are participating in that. And I really think it's exciting, and we'll try to get some mileage with that with the press locally, just to just show how we're committed to this idea of promoting aviation in the community. Lastly, the open house. Well, 2 things. One, next Wednesday is the master plan open house. So I don't want to confuse that with the airport open house. So in the terminal building, first at 2:00, the planning committee's meeting with the consultant, the engineer, to talk about the final phase of the master planning and the capital budgets that go with that. And then it opens up to the public at 5:00 in the afternoon.
What time does it start?
I think it's 5 to 7, if I'm not mistaken. The ad was published, and I also sent out a tenant bulletin about that, so it's been broadcast pretty well. And it's also been published in the Nevada Appeal. But that's really going to be the final presentation to the community for input before the very final piece, the final ALP and all the other chapters. So those links are up on the website. So I'll forward you the link to that so you can go online and look at that, those documents. But I want to emphasize, it's a great opportunity for not just the community, but also for the board to walk through and hear that. Obviously, the consultant is going to come back to the board and make a presentation directly, but this is an informal process. You can come in at any time you want during that 2-hour window. You don't have to ask any questions, but if you have any, they're there to give you that one-on-one time. The board obviously will not be making any deliberations or votes during that opportunity. So I don't think we really have a quorum issue because it's not an agenda item. So we're not going to run afoul of the open meeting law, but it's just there as an informational piece. And then lastly is the open house for June 29th. We are well underway in the preparations and we got 2 things that are really kind of critical, and I want to bring this to the board's point. I made a on-the-spot decision to bring in a charity as part of our open house process. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that I think it changes some of the minds of people participating in the open house, not just static display and that sort of thing, but businesses. I think if they think the airport's going to somehow profit from this, they may not take to it as kindly. But the other aspect is that we want to be a community partner. That's something that we talked about being in a strategic plan. So I went out directly and I spoke to the Eagle Valley Children's Home. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with that organization, but it's been in the community since 1946. And it's provided a valuable service to not just Carson City, but to the region. So I really want to push that out to everybody that has any interest in the open house as a way to really support a great community organization. We're also mixed it up a little bit. The Wing Fest 2019 refers to wings on airplanes, but also chicken wings. And so we've jumped in with this whole idea of having a chicken wing cook-off. And I look at this as a way to maybe get people to the airport that may not otherwise have shown up. And so with that, we're doing some different things in the way the event's going to be set up. We're going to use the parking lot on the south side of the building is where the vendors are. There's going to be some other vehicle displays, and we're doing off-site parking. And we work with St. Teresa's Church on Lampa Lane to utilize their parking facilities, and we're going to get some vans to be able to shuttle people back and forth. They'll be able to have a drop-off at the airport using the I think it's called Silver Lane, or that driveway that leads up to the terminal building. So people will be able to enter, drop off, and then turn out and go back to make the right turn and go back to parking. So I've already talked to the Boy Scouts about this. They're going to support our parking efforts. If you go to any big public event, the air races, the football game at UNR, a basketball game, you walk from your parking spot to the facility. So it may be a little bit of a consternation for something. We've always parked up here right next to the building. But I think what it's going to do is going to help our vendors, because people are going to have to come through the vendor area and into the air side, but it separates the traffic we had last year. We had food trucks driving out there with people. We had the guy showing up with his Cadillac piano, driving through people. We had people driving their car out there to unload their stuff for their vendor booth and pull it down. And so I really think it's a safety feature too, to separate those two activities. My goal was to raise 10 grand in sponsorships. We're a little over 5 right now and got some people still on the hook. But I think with the idea that we're helping support the children's home, Eagle Valley Children's Home, we'll move a couple of people in a different manner. I attended this morning the Carson High School career fair, which was very valuable experience. Not only did I get to talk to some young kids about aviation and airports, but I got to talk to the other 40 vendors that were there and pass out a flyer. So a little shameless self-promotion. But I think it's all good. I'm really excited about this event for the airport and for the community, because I think we've identified through our survey that people look forward to it. And so I think it's a great tool for the airport authority, and I'm excited about the prospect. So don't any of you leave town on June 29th. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. You might also mention the idea of getting polo shirts with the logo on them, so that if we are there on the 29th, that we can identify those people who
I did
support
get
the airport.
everybody's T-shirt order, so that's part of the step. We're going to be rolling out a couple other things that I'll talk to you about in the future as we move forward. But this logo, as you see, we got these window stickers. Last year, we gave out the sticker like this that's on my coffee cup, and those are very popular. The window stickers are vinyl, so they are clear on your window, and they can come off easily if at one point you decide that the airport manager is a jerk and you don't want to display the sticker anymore. So there's that.
All right, and moving on to item K, the treasurer's report. Since we do not have a treasurer, Mr. Moen, would you like to cover that?
I would. I think we've really covered this pretty effectively through the budgeting process. I want to highlight a couple things. We, in April, moved about $265,000 into the local government investment pool. So we're currently drawing about $1,100 a month in interest. And I want to thank Chair Law for really spearheading that process. The other beauty is that we're not using that funds, so we're getting the benefit of compound interest now as well. So as long as we can maintain that, we're coming up on the July 1 date where we're going to get some tax revenue. So we'll be able to probably add some more funds to it and be able to continue to build that base. So I'm happy about that. The balance sheet has a couple items that need corrected. There's under 1499, there's a negative number on undeposited funds. That was a a misposting of a check, so that's not too big of an issue. And then there's, under credit card, there's a 6320 with another negative number. Well, the only two cards we have are 6322 and 6323, which are mine and Gary's. And so that's another item that I think is a bookkeeping anomaly, and I'll get that straightened out. But I think we look good. Overall, the one adjustment that is a little bit out of whack as well, but it's based on a QuickBooks function. If you look under line item 49,900, which is uncategorized income, that's basically where the real property tax is under there, under 5010. So for July 18 through April 19, even though we received the check up front, we only put 1/12 of that amount into that line item every month. Well, the prior year, it says 98,000. And what happened in the QuickBooks function is that's only the first two quarters of 17-18. And so last year, the adjustment was made at the end of the fiscal year, so it's not reflecting the third quarter. So those are the anomalies that I came up with. But I think as an organization, we're doing better. And I think a lot of that is based upon the effort that this board has done in managing that, as well as some of the future past actions that you guys have taken in the last couple of years.
Thank you very much. Moving to item L, authority member reports of projects, internal communications, correspondence, and status reports. The only thing I would have to add to that is that as of today, Assembly Bill 406 finally got out of the Senate, and all it has to be is reported back to the Assembly and sent to enrollment, and our bill has passed. So I was sweating bullets this afternoon till I saw it pop over into the onto the Assembly side, and then I was much happier. The other thing is, everybody that I have talked to at the legislature, which has to be limited because of my position, is more than impressed and supportive of if we can get into the final appropriations bill, the $1 million for the Nevada Trust Fund, it would generate $15 million in federal monies. And if we can get that into the appropriations report, it seems to be favorably viewed by most of the people I've talked to. But when it comes right down to the short strokes, it depends on what happens the last few days of session. So we can, all hope and call our legislators and for as much as good as it will do. But if that were to get into that final bill as it has been promoted by Jeff Fontaine and Reza, right. He went in and had a very fruitful meeting with Assemblywoman Carlton, who's the head of Ways and Means, and all we can do at this point is hope. So that's my report. Do we have any other reports from other members? Member Barrett.
I'd just like to say that Chairperson Law deserves a great deal of credit for her stewardship as the head of this authority, and thank her.
Thank you all very much. It's not an individual effort. I appreciate that. All right, moving on. No other reports from the committee members. Then I would ask for public comment. Hearing none, we will move on. Anybody that has agenda items for the next regular meeting or for the special meeting, I think the only thing we're going to hold in that special meeting would be the augmentation issues. So for the July meeting, that would be the next opportunity to add something to the agenda. If you have it, please get a hold of Mr. Moen. And at this time, we are adjourned.